everyone. Good evening. Welcome to our UK event organized by Juwai.Asia in collaborations with Sovereign and First International Group. As Evan mentions, introduce myself. I'm Mandy, your host of the first half of the session today. And on behalf of Juwai.Asia, I would like to thank everyone for taking your time to join us this evening. So before we start, let me introduce the speaker of the day. So it's such an honorable to have a speaker from Sovereign Group to share their experience and knowledge on UK tax. So we have Simon, Managing Director of Sovereign Trust UK Limited, based in UK. And Simon has more than 30 years experience and expertise in international private client tax planning, trustee, corporate service, pension trustee, and market entry industrial. And he's currently the Vice President of the Royal Society of Fellows, is a member of Institute of Management, and is the founder and chairman of the International Professional Association Limited. He's a regular lecturer and speaker at tax planning and financial service conventions around the world. Without further delay, let us welcome Mr. Simon. Hi, Simon.
Hello, Mandy. Good morning, everybody. Good evening, everybody, I should say. Just looking at Mandy's picture of London Bridge there, to a 10-minute walk from where I am in London. But unfortunately, contrary to Hong Kong, it is obviously raining today because it's the 4th day of Wimbledon. It always rains, but I promise you it doesn't rain much aside from that. Believe me if you want to. Anyway, very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the introduction, Mandy. Thank you to Juwai.Asia. This is the 3rd time I've been presenting, and this presentation is recorded and can be or will be emailed to you. So if you want the other 2 presentations, which feature on commercial property and other asset classes, you only have to ask Juwai, in particularly Mandy and Jimmy. With me today, I have Winnie Chuk, who is an officer of our Hong Kong office, the sister headquarters of the Sovereign Group, a global organization. Winnie, welcome again. We have a very close bridge of collaboration between our Hong Kong sister headquarters and our London-based, where I am, ladies and gentlemen, most of the time, always, all that sort of thing. Mandy, do you want to bring up the presentation? Because
yep.
We've got a few minutes to get through 12 slides, ladies and gentlemen. Again, this soft version is going to be emailed to you. This is the focus, purchasing buy-to-let residential UK property and or acquiring a main or secondary UK residence. That's a property that is not rented, and of importance, effective in January, is taken advantage of the new UK visa that is applicable to Hong Kong citizens. And Winnie and myself are featured there. Next slide, please. Again, thank you for giving up some of your early pre-dinner time in Hong Kong. And I know you've got other things to move on to after this short presentation, but this, in the next few minutes, is what I'm going to cover. Part 1, the new immigration visa, and take note that Hong Kong citizens have now superior rights to EU nationals, no thanks to the UK leaving the EU on the 31st December, but still Hong Kong citizens, Hong Kong businesses have a very close connection with the United Kingdom, and that clearly is to continue. Then we move on to the UK tax landscape for Hong Kong citizens and all non-UK domiciled persons. And to avoid the question, is a Hong Kong citizen a non-domiciled person? Yes, they are. And you have a major tax benefit and tax advantage compared to me, who is UK domiciled and UK resident. I've got illustrations for you when to use a UK or an overseas company to purchase buy-to-let property. That's property you're not going to live in. And then an illustration of when to use personal ownership or perhaps a trust for a higher value property, that property in which your family might live in, especially if you're going to take advantage of the very fortunate visa program. Next slide, Mandy, please. That our Prime Minister, at least he got this right. Yes, the vaccination policy in the UK has been the best in Europe and one of the best in the world. And equally, we have passed immigration laws, courtesy of the Home Office, opening opportunities for Hong Kong nationals to enter the UK on this special visa. Fast track, easy to navigate, and this is here to stay. You can apply in or outside of the UK, depending on where certain members of family are based. You can apply to enter and remain in the UK for 30 months, which is more or less 12, 24, 36, 2.5 years, extendable for another 30 months. You're able to work, study, and take advantage of what the UK has to offer, but not to access public funds until the 5-year period is up. And after 5 years, you have this permanent settlement status, which means indefinite leave to remain. And in year 6, you can apply for British passport. So that's the journey open to you, clear, precise, good immigration law compared to the tax law. And you are all entirely welcome to contemplate that journey. Always, perhaps through Sovereign, appoint a Home Office regulated immigration advisor. I can give immigration information, but you need to have a regulated immigration advisor to assist the basic application. And everything that we'll talk about today, Sovereign, internal to Sovereign, that's the organisation that Winnie and myself represents, can deliver without any problems. So, why the taxation regime is so beneficial for persons that are non-UK domiciled, which obviously includes Hong Kong citizens. So you can still have and apply for the UK visa. You can still acquire a permanent settled status after 5 years, a passport in 6 years, and still you're going to be non-UK domiciled despite wishing to stay here for the foreseeable future. And there's no time limit on this, ladies and gentlemen. You can stay here a short time, pre 5 years, post 5 years, and post this little chart here. But let me explain domicile for you. Not that there are conferences that last days on this subject, but I don't want to bore you. This is a property sort of steered event, not for me to give you a tax diploma at the end of it. But Hong Kong nationals, being non-UK domiciled persons, have a major advantage when they invest in the UK or they come to live in the UK. And if you look at the chart here, if you do actually come to the UK and spend time here, reside here, even if you end up staying here for the rest of your lives, not that you will need to decide on that just yet, for your first 7 years, you are not taxed on your overseas income, your overseas gains, your overseas inheritances. You're just taxed in what you enjoy and earn in the UK and what income and gains you may bring to the UK. So if you have useful and accumulative wealth outside of the UK, Hong Kong or elsewhere, often it's a combination of both, the applicability of overseas trusts for Hong Kong persons and all non-domiciled persons is particularly useful, and our government have legislated positively for trusts. After 7 years, you have to decide whether you want to stay. hopefully yes, whether you want to be taxed on your worldwide income or you pay £30,000, which is a fixed charge to prevent your overseas income and gains from being assessed, controlled and taxed. That increases to 60,000 after 13 years. And once you live here for 15 years or more, you are taxed like a UK person like myself, with exception to what you have in a particular trust. Mandy, next slide, please. So, non-domicile persons that have wealth overseas, property, cash at bank, investment portfolio, commodities, crypto, doesn't matter what, valuables, works of art, anything that's outside of the UK. If you're going to come and live in the UK, you want to insulate that wealth, especially if it's the wealth that you are not going to use for your cost of living, and contribute it to an overseas trust. Maybe not a Hong Kong trust, it could be a Singapore trust or an Isle of Man trust. Trustee services in which we have specialised in for the last 34 years, and we've been in Hong Kong for at least 30 of those years. I actually opened the UK office 20 plus years ago. So Mr. and Mrs. C, I didn't want to invent a Hong Kong name. I know Chan is a popular Hong Kong name, but just in case there are any Chans in the audience, I just put Mr. and Mrs. C is the client, and you can make up who that name might be. They contribute some assets into a trustee by appointing the trustee's sovereign trust, Singapore, Isle of Man, there's a choice. A family friend, a professional advisor can be the protector because they have the right to dismiss the trustees and appoint other trustees. Mr. and Mrs. C, in this case, are the beneficiaries. The children are to succeed them, and maybe others will as well. The assets of the trust is cash at bank, investment portfolio, non-UK companies, a non-UK real estate, Hong Kong real estate, for example, and possibly, as in one case I'm dealing with, one of the spouses of the family want to put her spouse's Hong Kong and overseas companies into the trust after they have departed or during that process. Benefits, ladies and gentlemen, it's quite simply, like the illustration mentions, no tax going into the trust, and more importantly, God forbid, if Mr. and Mrs. C unfortunately suffer an unexpected demise whilst they're in the UK, even post 15 years being in the UK, zero inheritance tax, because inheritance tax in the UK is the worst tax on the planet. It takes, the government of the UK takes 40% of your worldwide assets in the event of your demise after living in the UK for 15 years, but they definitely take 40% of any UK asset. That is why structures like trusts are very, very important, and it need not be complicated. Plus you get income and capital gains tax planning. So there's the sort of part 1 and 2 delivered for you. I can take questions offline, I can take questions on the email, and 1 or 2 questions today, and you've got Winnie in Hong Kong as well. Next slide, Mandy. Now, not such a positive slide, but this is now moving on to the purchase of property. The good news is this: the purchase of property involves a tax called a stamp duty tax, but it's once only. It's just a purchase tax. Under 500,000, under 925,000, it's 5% or less, which is not so bad. But 925,000 and above, the tax rates become quite high. So factor in the stamp duty when you are embarking on a buy-to-let residential property investment, a main residence. But at the very last point here, ladies and gentlemen, the very, very last point, if you're buying commercial property, which may be an office, a warehouse, or something you don't live in, the maximum rate is 5%. So you can steer towards that if you particularly like commercial property acquisitions, and quite often there is a very useful yield to be enjoyed. Anyway, the government, due to the medical crisis, has extended the stamp duty holiday for the first 250,000. So if you're buying property less than that, possibly not in London, there's no stamp duty. And that finishes in the 3rd of December. If it's not going to be your main residence, there's a 3% surcharge. And if overseas buyers are not going to come to the UK and reside, there's a 2% surcharge. Now, there's lots and lots of information on this, but this gives you a complete picture, the no-nonsense situation in addressing the stamp duty. Next slide, Mandy. Then we talk about, well, what are the ongoing taxation? And I'm sorry, it's not as good as Hong Kong, but never buy a property in a company, Hong Kong, UK, doesn't matter, unless you're going to rent it. If you're not going to rent it, do not buy it through a company, because if you buy it through a company and you're going to enjoy it for the family, permanently, part-time, you're going to have to pay an annual tax charge, which goes up very, very steeply. So just don't buy a property in a company unless it's going to be rented. From 2015, rather like continental Europe, capital gains tax applies to non-residents, whether that's a Hong Kong person buying and selling, or whether it's a Hong Kong offshore Isle of Man company that buys and sells and it's owned by a non-resident. There's capital gains tax at, well, the individual rate is 28%, and the corporate rate is 19%. But quite fatally, if you buy in your own name or you buy in a company name and you're the shareholder of the company, upon your demise, the UK HMRC and Treasury will need to be paid 40% of inheritance tax on your demise, and you only get £325,000 as an exemption. If Winnie and I was married, sorry Winnie, but that's a fate worse than what you'd think, but if Winnie and I was married and we jointly owned that property, then Winnie's 325,000 and my 325,000 is joined, so that's 650,000. So imagine Winnie is a Mrs. Denton, spare the thought. Good for me, not for Winnie. Then the inheritance tax doesn't apply on my first death because I'm older than Winnie and ladies live longer anyway. The inheritance tax is reserved on the final demise of the final spouse. So upon Winnie suffering an unexpected demise, you take the first 650 from the property value, and then the government takes 40%. So in red, investors that decide to purchase any property asset in their personal names should try to buy with mortgage finance, because mortgage finance is cheap these days, ladies and gentlemen. When I delivered a mortgage finance proposal for an Italian lady living in Switzerland, and it was a main residence, not a buy-to-let, the rate was 1.69%. And another client that was on the buy-to-let strategy, it was just over 3%, which is not so bad. Whether you're buying in a company or an individual name, make sure you undertake and create a will to deal with the succession. Even if Winnie is going to get my share and the children are going to get the rest, make a will and work out, or let us work out, the worst case inheritance tax liability. because people under the age of 60, life insurance, although it's not a very positive subject, life insurance can be acquired. It's not expensive, and the life insurance policy can settle and compensate the family from having to pay any inheritance tax liability, because the insurance pays the inheritance tax. And that's not expensive. You don't have to be 21 playing football for England or Germany, or Hong Kong for that matter. Life insurance is not expensive if you're in good health, hopefully a non-smoker, and you're going to live a very long life. Let's hope so. Sovereign deliver on all of this. Next slide, please, Mandy. So, buy-to-let investment, a property that you're not going to live in, which should be owned by a company. Companies never die, people do. Companies have limited liability, people don't. Companies can get attractive rates of mortgage, and all of the mortgage finance, that's the interest charges, are deductible from the rental income, and the net rental income will only be subject to 19% tax, not too different from the Hong Kong corporation tax rate. UK companies are less expensive to administer than offshore companies. Dividends paid from a UK company to a Hong Kong or non-resident, no tax. And net rental income is still only subject to 19%, not too different from Hong Kong. So that's not a bad tax compared to the tax rates that I have to pay on my worldwide income. However, on the demise of the surviving spouse, using Winnie and Simon's situation, or if there's only one spouse, 40% inheritance tax still applies. So mortgage, wills, and the life insurance has to be considered. So there's situations for a UK company, which is popular, especially if the Hong Kong people are going to come to, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Chinese, doesn't matter. If they're going to relocate to the UK corporate landlord, a UK company, is quite attractive. For certain higher value properties, ladies and gentlemen, the higher value buy-to-let with mortgage finance, why not? It's cheap, 3%. You could use an overseas company, and that overseas company could be owned by a family trust, or if they're UK domiciled, a pension scheme, no dividend tax, basic corporation tax on rental income at 19%, but no UK inheritance tax. So for higher value properties, especially way over 650,000, the overseas option is a good one. And I'm going to illustrate those to you now. Thank you, Mandy. Right. So keeping with the first example, you've got a married couple. It doesn't matter if they're not married, or it could be just an individual. It doesn't really matter who they are, but we're suggesting that they're Hong Kong people, non-domiciled, maybe moving to the UK, looking at mortgage finance, looking at a buy-to-let purchase made in the UK company. So to get the advantages in the left-hand side here, there's no tax going into the company because they're shareholders, and we've got simplified legislation, a bit like Hong Kong. There's no annual tax charge because Winnie and I are not living in the property. This property or properties are being rented to third parties, perhaps through a rental agent. Net rental income, 19%. Full deductibility of mortgage interest. So if your rental income is £2,000, if your rental income is £20,000 a year and your loan interest is 10,000, then you only pay 19% on the net balance. If that property was owned by Winnie or Winnie and myself, we would only be able to deduct 20% of the interest. So clearly, HMRC prefer a corporate landlord than a private landlord. But if you sell the property It's 19% corporation tax on the gain, and inheritance tax 40% will apply. So will provisioning in life insurance is very important. Now, next slide, please. I'm keeping to time. Then you've got a slightly more sophisticated option, and this would be where the real estate is at least 1 million, which would justify the little extra expense for a slightly more sophisticated arrangement. Again, it would be Mr. and Mrs. C, the Hong Kong, or Mrs. C or Mr. C in Hong Kong that would create a trust, appoint sovereign. But Mr. C, if it is Mr., sorry for being sexist, the spouse, children, and others would be the beneficiaries, but the settlor would have to be excluded. So you get the full benefits of this rather generous taxation planning. The trust owns an Isle of Man company, could be anywhere, but not the UK. And this company buys the real estate of at least 1 million. You could get 50% financing, sorry, you could get 65% financing as a minimum, and it'd be about 3.5%. So no tax going in, no annual tax on the special tax charge because the property is rented, not enjoyed by the family. Net rental income and capital gains, if sold, is 19%, full deductibility of mortgage interest, and no inheritance tax upon Mr. or Mrs. C, unfortunately, suffering a demise, and no inheritance tax if the beneficiaries, any or all of them, are suffering a demise. So a bit of tax advice, case by case, those benefits are still applicable and to a non-domiciled person, a Hong Kong person or any non-domiciled person, even if they do eventually move to the UK, not a problem. Next slide, please. So the default option for buying a property, if it's less than £2 million and you're going to buy it to enjoy, any of you in the room in this webinar, if you're going to buy a property, if you're married, try to buy it in joint names. Make sure you take out a will. You could still get mortgage finance of 65%, between 1% and 2%, more or less. If you're going to live here and reside here, the mortgage is less. And you then consider life insurance, but the inheritance tax is paid on the demise of the last surviving spouse. But if there is no spouse or there's not a same-sex marriage or civil partnership, that inheritance tax is rather steep. But if it's a property that you're going to enjoy, be it a main or secondary residence, there for the family, for the children to enjoy it while they're at university, that one of the parents to come more often to the UK, one of the parents or both parents to come to reside in the UK, to take advantage of that special visa that was effective in January, thanks to our Prime Minister who got that policy right, then you set up an overseas trust and the £2 million property is acquired by the trustee for the benefit of the settlor, the spouse, the children, and others. And there's no tax charge going in. There's no annual tax charge because it's a trust, not a company. No capital gains tax if the property is sold on the basis that mum, daughter, son, dad, all of you or one of you live in the property for 90 nights a year. No inheritance tax on the death of any beneficiary or any of the settlors. So higher priced property, there's your answer, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I have for once finished on time with 3 minutes to go, Mandy and Jimmy. Those are our contact details. Winnie in Hong Kong, a fond colleague and an expert in what she does and speaking at least Cantonese and as good as English as I do. And my team in the UK being David, Andy, Stuart. Stuart was based in Hong Kong a number of years ago, has a close working relationship, and is based in the north of England, where there is a genuine Chinatown in Manchester and Liverpool. And it's not just the UK where our friends from Hong Kong tend to invest. They invest all over the country, and they're very welcome as well. So there's our contact details, both Hong Kong and the UK. And Mandy, I'm not sure if there's any questions, but I think that concludes in 30 minutes the BNO visa, the nice visa available to Hong Kong nationals. That's even better than the visas that are not so available to EU nationals. How the tax landscape for non-DOMs and Hong Kong DOMs exploit that with my permission and the government's permission, government of the UK, how to buy a buy-to-let residential property or a main residence, and case by case, a client consultation, sharing our ideas, sharing our experiences through Winnie, myself, or both without obligation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the sharing. I think it's very insightful, and I hope that the audience will get a benefit from this sharing. And should you have any questions, feel free to mark it, okay, and pass the list to our consultants on the floor, and we will get Winnie, okay, that based in Hong Kong, that can contact you directly to talk about the detail of all your concerns. Again, once again, thanks for your time, and I hope today's sessions will benefit you as well for your investment as well as your tax planning. On behalf of Juwai.Asia, I would like to thank our speaker for such an insightful sharing. Should you need further questions, again, feel free to contact them. The contact number, you can actually get it from the consultants on the floor. And do stay tuned for our upcoming UK webinar. I'm Mandy Chen. Hope you have a great week ahead. Take care and stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.